to Black America, this is the greatest challenge, according to Dr. Claude Anderson. The greatest challenge to Black America is to do what Blacks have never been permitted to do in the past. Through centuries of slave insurrections, civil rights demonstrations, and urban riots, Blacks have never had a public policy or a clearly identifiable goal. They have not developed a public policy on how to deal with racism, where they intend to go as a people, and how to best get there. This public policy ought to be broadly disseminated to all Blacks and interlinked with all levels of Black communities across America. All segments, churches, schools, businesses, and community organizations should be involved in designing strategies and supporting the public policy. Rather than reinventing the wheel, Blacks should use white society's model for establishing public policy because it was very successful. Now, here's what I want to throw out there as something to consider in your own public policy. Here's what my ideology is, and I think Dr. Anderson gets where I'm coming from with this. I believe that in order for us to move forward as a community, we're going to have to do a little bit of what the blockchain does for crypto. We're going to have to become, I call it the black chain, right? So we got to take a blockchain approach. The beauty of the blockchain, in case, for those of you that may not be familiar with crypto, is that the blockchain decentralizes things so that you're not leaning on sort of one centerpiece in terms of how to get things done. The blockchain, because it's so decentralized, it makes it harder to kind of attack the blockchain. You can't sort of go in and do some of the things that you might have been able to do with the fiat currency system, which is why the blockchain is brilliant. So I believe that for Black people, we have to think of our leadership in the same way. We have to go to the black chain as opposed to what we've done before. The previous type of Black leadership we've had is where there was one sort of central point where there was maybe one or two Black leaders or one Black council that kind of gave the whole narrative for the whole community and told everybody what to do. And in some cases, it ends up being a group that's controlled by whites, right? Some group that's, the gatekeepers, the Al Sharpton types, no offense to Jesse Jackson or anybody else that might be in that category. I'm sure they did their best. But I believe that Black leadership needs to be decentralized because that's the best way to maintain control. So the decentralization means this. It means that I believe Black leadership should take place in every single household in our community. Every household, everybody in here that's in a household that is either a head of a household or one of the key decision makers in the household, I believe it is up to you to shape the public policy that exists within your household. My parents can say that they had 3 kids that went on and became much more successful than the children of all their friends. All my friends I grew up with, a lot of them on drugs, in jail, dead, all kinds of stuff. And the thing that made our family a little bit different is because in our household, my father was the king, my mother was the queen. In our household, we shaped our public policy without worrying about what little Jimmy down the street was doing. If I said, anybody have that kind of mama where you say, well, so-and-so was allowed to do it, and why can't I do it too? And you say, well, I'm not, your mama says, I don't care about your little friends. I'm not their mama, right? Their mama, that's not your mama. Your mama said this, right? So our parents were kind of like that. Our parents are like, I don't care what anybody else is doing. This is what's going to happen in this house. This is our policy in this house. And it was a policy that was built on things like valuing education, valuing good decisions, valuing personal responsibility. If you go out here and do something stupid and you get locked up, we're not bailing you out. You're going to get yourself out of jail. You're going to stay in jail until you come up with the money to get yourself out of jail. Now, that might seem harsh to some people, but that was the policy my parents had in our house. And that's the one that kept us focused, right? So my point is to say that every family should sort of think about what your public policy is going to be as it relates to what being Black means to you. Maybe I can be one of the advisors that can help you shape that policy. I'm going to tell you what the policy is that I recommend, the one I stand by. It's called the Black Core of 3. It's a very simple policy that, if implemented in even 10% of Black households, is going to shift Black wealth by several $1 trillion within one generation. This is, in my view, a game changer. I'm not speaking as an average Joe. My PhD is in finance, so I am a financial economic researcher. So I understand exactly what moves the needle when it comes to economics. The Black Core 3, some of you have heard it. I'm going to repeat it to you now. The Black Core 3 is very simple, easy to memorize. You can write this down and share this with your family if this is something that appeals to you. 1, Black people must, with absolute certainty, find ways to educate our own children. We must educate our own children because education isn't just education. Education is an indoctrination. Education doesn't just give you facts and figures, it gives you your value system, right? So ultimately, you must be the primary educator when it comes to your kids. It doesn't mean you have to homeschool them. We are in the process of trying to develop homeschool networks and all that. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of work. Whenever I talk to the celebrities, I tell them, let's build a school system. Go get me $50 million and I can educate 100,000 black kids. I can do that with $50 million, right? But until that day comes, you have the internet. You are the primary influencer on your child. So in my view, every black person, every black parent must educate our own children, because our kids are going to these white schools, and these white schools are messing up their damn brains. These kids are graduating. They can't even read, can't write, can't do math, can't start a business, can't do nothing. They cannot survive, can't grow their own food, don't know how to do nothing except twerk and play basketball. What the hell is that? They're ruining your future. They're destroying your seed. They are poisoning your soil. They're doing that deliberately because they want you to stay broken down, busted up, a day late and a dollar short. They're used to the narrative of black people always coming in last, and they do everything they can to maintain that status quo. So you must educate your own children. Number two, you must learn how to create your own job. If you go to my Instagram, which is the real Boyce Watkins, you might not be able to find it. I guess because I speak so much black stuff, they shadow ban me. So you can check for Financial Juneteenth or the Black Financial Channel, because I posted it on a couple platforms. But basically, we must learn how to create our own jobs. I'm just going to tell you, when you talk about concepts like equality, think about this. Especially, I'm talking to the men for a second. If your ability to be a man is determined by another man, how can you say that man is your equal? Like, how can you ever pursue equality with another man when that man gets to decide if you get to be a man? When you're running around here begging for opportunities and saying, gosh, I hope somebody gives me an opportunity. I hope they give me a job. I hope they give me this and give me that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a job. I'm not saying there's anything wrong working for white people. We're not into that. I'm not here to job shame or none of that. But what I'm just trying to really say to you, just keep it 100. Let's be honest. Give me a yes or no. If one man feels that his ability to be a man is determined by another man, are those men really equal? Can you say that we're equal? No. If black people are always working for white people, how in the world can black people be equal to white people? It's not possible. You're not equal. One has all the power, the other one doesn't have any power, so that's not equality. The pimp and the hoe are never on the same plateau. If the pimp's calling the shots, the hoe, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't be the subordinate and be the leader at the same time. It just doesn't work, right? And so what I'm saying to you is that we must gain the ability to create our own jobs. This must be job one. This must, and it looks, and let me give you a simple description of what this looks like. A lot of y'all have smart kids. A lot of you have smart children that are going to go to college and do well and get great job offers and go on and make $1 million. And I think that's wonderful for them. But the issue to me is that one of the core values of that child should be, I'm going to multiply my success. How do I multiply my success? I'm smart. I'm good at what I do. How do I clone myself? I had a conversation this morning with two guys, Brother Ben X and Brother Farrakhan, who are buying hundreds of acres of land in South Georgia. It's called Hereafter Farms. I'm investing in the project. I'm going to buy a plot in their property, because I let them know. I said, I'm very proud of you. I want to support you. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I want to be a part of this. And I told them, I said, the first thing I would love to help you do whenever you're ready is I want to see you clone yourself. I want to see 1 million black men who are just like you. Right? Because Ben X, you're not going to see him run around talking about popping mollies. You ain't going to hear about Brother Farrakhan getting 18 girls pregnant. You ain't going to hear about one of these guys going out and shooting up the club or telling black people to go kill each other. You're not going to see any of that stuff. You're not going to see that toxic behavior. Right? So what we need to do is find processes to mass produce. That's how you win a war. You win a war through mass production. Right? That's how that's how America won World War II. It's through the ability to mass produce bullets and guns and ships and tanks and everything else. Right? So we must, as black people, train our children on what it looks like to mass produce outcomes that are beneficial to more than just yourself. It ain't just about you. Who cares about what you did and how good your grades are and how special you are? I think that's great. But once you become the leader, or once you become the role model, you also must become the teacher. You must become the teacher. You must become the job creator, right? So getting one good job is good for you. I think that's wonderful, but that's not the same as creating 10, 20, or 30 jobs for other people in your community. You must be not just become a king, you must become a kingmaker. So ultimately what has to occur in our educational process is that at an early age, the ability to systematize and create jobs must be a core value of Black children. There should not be a successful Black man or Black woman anywhere who isn't sitting around thinking, how can I make sure that a lot of people are benefiting from the talent and the skill and the opportunity and the wealth that I have been able to create for myself? You understand? So the core value, Black core 3, educate our own children, create our own jobs. The last piece, support Black businesses. Support Black business. That's called the Great Redirect. If we do, right now we're living through the Great Resignation. I'm also pushing you to consider something that's happening now called the Great Redirect, which is where we redirect at least 10% of our spending, 10% of our spending that goes to whites and Jews and Arabs and Asians and everybody else, redirect that back to the Black community. We have 1.4 trillion in Black spending that occurs every year. This is not Black. This is not spending power. This is spending. Spending is not powerful. So I'm not going to call it Black spending power. I'm just going to call it Black spending. 1.4 trillion. That is greater than the GDP of dozens of countries on this planet. I think there are only 10 countries on earth that have a gross domestic product that exceeds the amount of money that Black people spend every year. So with that said, given that your spending power exceeds, or your spending amounts, I'm not going to say power, sorry, that your spending amounts exceed the GDP of countries like Mexico and Indonesia, and you're right up there with Canada, and you exceed Saudi Arabia, etc., well, then all you have to do is redirect a percentage of that money, and that will allow you to build absolute empires. You can create Black billionaires every single year. 10% of 1.4 trillion is $140 billion. You could buy the whole NFL 10 or 15 times over with just 1 year of the spend of 1 year. 10% of 1 year spending could literally buy the entire NFL. So when you have these athletes and these entertainers saying that we can't afford to own our own sports league, that is not mathematically true. You actually have the ability to create whatever you want. Again, your spending exceeds the GDP of Colombia. Colombia has sports leagues in it. Colombia has its own school system. Colombia has its own businesses. Colombia has millions of acres of land. So ultimately what you're lacking is really the imagination necessary to say, how do I take what we have and systematize that and position it so that it actually grows into something big and powerful and sovereign that we actually own and control ourselves. So that's the Black core 3. Black people must educate our own children, create our own jobs, and support Black business. That is my public policy for Black people. If we do this, if just 10% of us do this in this generation, that will lead to a multi-trillion-dollar wealth transfer in the Black community. And you're already seeing it happening now. But I believe we're just at the beginning of this whole cycle. Moving on. Next, somebody's asking about my t-shirt. So, oh yeah. Actually, if you go to All Black Tees, allblacktees.com, that's where my t-shirts are. So feel free to go to allblacktees.com and hit the thumbs up button if you're listening online. All right. So let's see. Conclusion. Black Americans should have always been a compassionate and caring people, or we've always been a compassionate and caring people. They should continue to do so, but it is now time for them to put their own interests first if they are to have any chance of changing their negative living conditions. Black America must develop strategies and programs that serve their best interests and allow them to both develop and protect themselves within a society that historically committed harmful acts against them. Until Black obsolescence was reached about 20 years ago, Blacks had limited ability to organize because they lacked capital, leadership, and resources, and were restrained by an economic system that still had a use for them. Now that Black labor is non-essential and expendable, Blacks as a group are vulnerable and expendable. So what he's basically saying is that there was a time where they really needed you to support American capitalism, right? They needed you in order to make money. Now they don't really need you as much anymore. Now they have between technology and Mexicans, they don't really need you. They don't need you anymore. So the question is, well, what can we do with these people? We feel like they're a nuisance. What do we do with them? Well, we can put them in prison. That's what Biden and Clinton figured out back in the 1990s. We're building all these prisons. We got to pay for them somehow. So we're going to lock up a percentage of our population that helps us solve two problems at once. We get rid, we got a virus. We have a pandemic. The pandemic is all these super predators that are in our communities that are plaguing our communities like roaches. So we need to build prisons. We need to put 100,000 cops on the street. That's what they said. We need $10 billion so that we can go lock up as many of these super predators as possible. So they treated you. You were the original pandemic. You were the original COVID. You were the original thing that they said we're going to vaccinate. We're going to make sure that I'm not going to use the V word because I get in trouble when I use the V word online, so I'm not going to mess with that. But seriously, they literally said we're going to disinfect society by locking up as many of these so-called super predators as we can, and we're going to make money off of them at the same time. That's where private prisons come from. That's where these expensive phone calls. I don't know if anybody ever has ever seen just how they milk the inmates and their families. Like if you get locked up, you go into the legal system. That's a great way to go broke. That's another way that black wealth is stolen. Black wealth gets taken through student loans. It can be taken through getting sick. If you go through the healthcare system, big pharma gets their money. Or if you have one or more relatives in your family that is in the criminal justice system, your money will be leaking out of your butt faster than you can say, what the hell just happened? You literally will be leaking money like it is a hemorrhage. The lawyer's going to get you. The court's going to fine you for every little thing. Once you get in jail, it costs money to do every little thing that you want to do. And then on top of that, once you get out, you still have to keep paying. And don't get in a situation where you got to pay things like restitution and all that, right? So these systems are designed in order to build wealth and resources for the dominant white society, and you are a very easy target for these things, especially if you're not aware of what's going on. All right, so let's keep going. A National Plan for Black Empowerment. This is page 171, Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. I hope you all will go to powernomics.com and do a cash mob on Dr. Anderson's site because he is a great man. He was actually on Charlemagne the God's new show on Comedy Central. So I'm really happy that Charlemagne is supporting Dr. Anderson. There are a lot of celebrities that are starting to get on board, and I think that's really a great thing. He says a national plan for Black empowerment should focus on Blacks becoming politically and economically competitive by acquiring increased wealth and resource power. The greatest challenge to Black America is to do what it has never done before. Through the centuries of slavery, Jim Crowism, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Black Power period, Blacks have never had a public policy or racial goals to effectively deal with racism. Instead of an empowerment plan, new generations of Blacks have inherited the vestiges of a failed 1960s strategy. Three major failings deserve highlighting. So these are the failures of the 1960s strategy, according to Dr. Claude Anderson. First, Black leadership mistakenly believed that by removing Jim Crow symbols, that racism would effectively die. It did not. Two, they thought that integration would make them equal and give them control of resources and power. It did not. In fact, you weren't properly integrated at all. You were brought in a subordinated status. You weren't brought in as equal partners. Those are two different things. Third, they failed to construct long-term institutions with long-term goals that could transcend generational lines and produce a never-ending flow of competent, well-informed new talent. Young Blacks must have a public policy and a plan for direction. All segments of the community, churches, schools, businesses, and community organizations must be involved in formulating and implementing the plan. But the plan must be coordinated nationally by an institute with an intellectual infrastructure. Modeling the methods used by whites, Blacks must develop an accountability system to make sure that all Blacks support the goals of the plan. Blacks will have to be equally as determined and committed to public policy on Black self-empowerment as white society has been to public policy on the use of Blacks. Blacks must be willing to apply social sanctions and other penalties against those who violate the public policy for Blacks. The Black Empowerment Plan must be based upon a vision of vigorously competing in a changing world. The plan must go beyond the dream of equality and integration, which hangs before them like a carrot on a stick. So they got you chasing equality and integration, neither of which you've adequately achieved. And and I will just tell you, I think chasing equality, not only is it not necessarily an interesting goal to me, but you're chasing it completely the wrong way. You can't talk about equality if you're not talking about wealth. If you've got 100 times more wealth than me and you get to define how happy I am, whether I feel like a man or not a man, well, we're not equal. We're clearly a subordinate. If I go to church and I'm begging white Jesus to give me an opportunity, and then a white man comes along and says, I like you, boy. I'm going to give you an opportunity. I say, thank you, sir. This is exactly what I prayed for. Well, I wasn't really praying to white Jesus. I was praying to that white man. That's who I was really praying to, right? Because he's my economic God. So the way to get around this is you must train your children to create opportunities. They just like it's for those of you that like sports. A good analogy is in sports, they have something called a playmaker. A playmaker is a person who knows how to create something out of nothing. Like shout out to Deion Sanders down at Jackson State. He actually recruited, he's getting a lot of flack right now because he actually recruited the #1 high school player in the country, a guy named Travis Hunter. I believe that's his name. And it's really fascinating to watch because white folks are mad, big mad because they're like, wait a minute, those are our Negroes. How dare you take our Negroes and talk them into going to an HBCU? That's a terrible mistake. And it's really funny because he passed up Florida State University. And if you follow college football, you'll know Florida State University absolutely sucks at football right now. Like their program is literally like Death Valley in terms of performance, but that's beside the point. But either way, though, the reason Deion Sanders recruited Travis Hunter is because he is a playmaker. He is such a great talent that he can make something happen out of nothing, right? So for economically speaking, the economic equivalent of a playmaker is a person who says, we need to create some wealth. We need to drum up some money. We need to create some opportunities. How are we going to get that done, right? So if they understand, if they have vision, if they understand how the economic game works, they know exactly how to position themselves so that they're able to create something out of nothing. I mean, there are people out there like that. You'll see them. These are the people that just know how to go find a way to make money, no matter what situation that they're in. They know where the resources are. They know how to go get it. They know how to position themselves properly. These are skills that you train your kids on at an early age, because if their only play, if the only move they have is, I need money, I need to go apply for a job and hope that a white man hires me, they're boxed in for life. You box them in for life. So again, this goes back to the clear point I want to make to you. I'm not saying that working for white people is something you should be ashamed of. I'm not saying that at all. I hope you get that. Give me a yes if you understand. If we can agree. I want to make this clear because some people think when I say this that I'm saying that working for other people is for suckers and that you should never have a job and that working with a white man, even talking to the white man, is bad. No, let me just tell you. Once you have power over your own life, you don't spend your life constantly shucking, jiving, and afraid of white people. You're not spending your life mad at white people all the time because you think they control your destiny, right? The more liberated you are, the more actually the more friendly you can be with everybody. You don't care. I meet white people, they think I'm wonderful because I'm not begging them for a job. I'm not mad at them for oppressing me. You're not the reason I'm not taking care of my kids. I chose to take care of my kids. So I can talk to you man to man, which means I have no reason to be threatened by you or have some sort of emotional reaction to you, other than the fact that maybe we can be friends if we're both nice to each other. I got 2 kids, or I got 3 kids, you got 3 kids. How about our kids play together? That's totally cool, right? So when I meet my white friends, we get along pretty well because there's no hang up. I'm not asking them for anything. They're not asking me for nothing. It works, right? So I'll just tell you, at the end of the day, working for other people is fine. You just don't want that to be your only option. If that's your only option and that option gets shut off to you, then what you're going to experience is various forms of economic stress. And people who've experienced economic stress become irritable as shit, right? I know it. I know it because I got relatives who ask me for money. I give them a little money, and then when I can't keep the money coming, and I say, "Hey, I'm gonna have to cut you off," they start cussing me out. Anybody ever seen that? Like, man, see, you ain't right, man. F you, man. Blah, 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 right? They get mad, right? And I get it. I don't take it personally because I know what you're feeling. You're feeling economic anxiety that comes from the fact that I was your only move. I was the only option you had, which means that the key to freedom is options, man. Options and freedom are like siblings with each other. If you have options, you always have freedom, period. When I talk to young people about what they want to do when they grow up, I say, I don't know. You can look into different careers, but whatever you do, make sure you got options. If you got options, you have freedom. You'll be happy, right? Freedom is connected to happiness. That freedom, options, and happiness are all siblings that live in the same house. If you get one, you will typically have the other, period. Let me keep going. Let me keep going. And this links to so many other things. It links to mental health. A lot of Black people are depressed. Why? Well, because you don't have freedom, you don't have happiness, because you don't have any options. You feel stuck in a life that you don't want to live because you don't have the ability to go live a different life. If you're not stuck and you can go pick the life that's going to work for you, then you're not going to be as depressed. This has been shown in studies. They did this with rats. They put rats in a situation they couldn't get out of, and the rats became very depressed. They measured this by the amount of serotonin in their brains. The serotonin tells you how depressed they were. The rats got very depressed when they couldn't get out of their situation. But when you gave the rats freedom, they then became very happy. So if you want to be happy, find your freedom. Well, what does freedom look like? Well, freedom typically shows up in the form of options, right? And that gives you happiness. So those are all connected. Let me keep going. Next, okay, I'm on chapter 8. I'm starting chapter 8 of Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson. I want to keep reminding you, if you want a copy, you can go to powernomics.com. I'm going to keep reciting this website because I want to make sure Dr. Anderson gets proper credit for his brilliant, brilliant work. Also, those of you that want to take a look at the Black Wealth Bootcamp that starts January 6th, you can actually go to boycewatkins.com. If you want to sign up now, feel free to use the code word Dr. Boyce. One word, Dr. Boyce, to get 20% off anything in the Black Business School. So feel free to go to boycewatkins.com. If you're already a member of the Black Wealth Bootcamp, you can join live for free. So don't sign up again. If you're already a member, you have lifetime access. You can join this upcoming bootcamp for free. And then new members can feel free to go to boycewatkins.com and you can find the Black Wealth Bootcamp. Use the code word Dr. Boyce, or you can go to blackwealthbootcamp.com, either one. All right, so let me read. This is chapter 8 is Becoming Politically and Economically Competitive in America. And here's a quote from Apollonius. Sounds like a remember Prince's when he did Purple Rain. It was Apollonia. That was her name. The real pretty lady. All right. So the gods, quote, the gods see what is to come. Wise men see what is coming, and ordinary men see what has come. Interesting. So gods see what is gonna come. The wise men see what is coming. Ordinary men see what has come. Right. So that ordinary man, the one who sees what has come, is a man who is reacting to what just happened, right? So and you can't be God, so nobody knows what the future holds, but you can be wise, right? That's what this quote is saying. This quote is saying that if you're wise, you look down the road. If you're wise, you look at the future. If you're wise, you're thinking about your family for the next generation and beyond, right? So ultimately, when I think about this, I think about this week how I was literally imagining my life, but I was trying to look at my life from the year 20. It's 20. What is it? It's 2021, right? I was trying to look at my life from the year 2180. I was literally trying to go into the future, and I said, what will the year 2021 look like in the year 2180, 160 years from now? So what I did was, to understand that, I said, how does it, so I went back 120 years, 160 years, excuse me. 160 years ago was 1860, right before the Civil War. And I thought about how we feel when we look at old pictures from the Civil War. It looks crazy, right? They're dusty. They're standing next to their horse. They take the pictures. Nobody smiles. They all look like they're mad about something, right? Because they're living in the Dust Bowl on the farm, or some of them are on slave plantations, right? So I thought about how crazy those pictures look and how many things have happened since 1860 that couldn't be imagined at that time, right? If you went to 1860 and you talked to them about jet airplanes, they can't even conceive that, right? Because nobody could fly in 1860. If you told them about a man going to the moon, or about having a cell phone where you could talk to people, anywhere in the world, or the ability to get on an airplane in LA in the morning and be in New York, in 4 or 5 hours, like that would have been completely inconceivable to them, right? So, and they look crazy and dusty. They probably thought they were hip and cool and modern, but to us, it's a joke. It's hilarious, but it was also real and it was relevant, right? Because back at that time, there were companies that were created, companies like, Coca-Cola or Smith & Wesson, or major corporations, General Electric, that were starting around the 1860s, that are multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies now. Do you follow what I'm saying? Do you get a Wells Fargo? Thank you very much, Ryan. I can name a lot of companies that started around that time, 160 years ago, that are massive global trillion-dollar entities today. And I know for a fact that there is no way that if you look at what they look like in 1860, that they could even visualize or imagine what they look like now. Like they literally, you could tell them they wouldn't even believe you. They literally would not believe you. Georgetown University, Harvard University, right? A lot of these institutions that are massive today, they existed 160 years ago, but they weren't even a fraction of what they eventually became. Right. So what it made me think about was, I said, okay, now I got to go back in my head and imagine that I'm that old, dusty guy from 160 years ago. Right. Like, we take our pictures. We feel like we're modern, hip and cool. We're like, yeah, look at us. We got cell phones and the metaverse and Facebook and all that. Just know that in 160 years, your great grandkids or Black people 160 years from now, you're gonna look raggedy. You're gonna look dusty. They're looking at pictures of you from the future and they're laughing at you right now. Like, we're taking these, here I am, I'm doing this video and I'm talking. I think that everything I'm saying makes sense. There's something about the way I look or the way I sound that is gonna sound straight up ridiculous. And they're gonna be like, oh my God, people back then were so proper, or they wore t-shirts back then, or whatever. I don't know what that future looks like, right? I can't imagine necessarily what that future looks like. But what are the things that I can hold on to? What are the certainties that I know will probably exist? Well, here's what I know. One, at least at the very least, one, I know that white people are probably going to keep on being white, because in 1860 you had a racial divide, and in 2021 you still have a racial divide. I do know that, right? So we do know that chances are in 160 years, white people will still be white, black people will still, be working through whatever we're working through as black people. What else do I know? I do know, based on what I saw from 1860, that there are some tiny little raggedy ass companies that ain't making no money, where y'all looking dusty as hell right now, that are going to grow into trillion-dollar empires. That I know. That I know, right? I know this, right? So I do. So that means that there are investments that can be made now. There are legacies that can be built now. There are institutions that can be established now that in 160 years are probably going to grow into something that we can't even imagine, right? We know this because that's exactly what happened before, right? What do we also know? We also know that there are going to be developments and opportunities. There are going to be entire stories told and legends lived in the next 160 years that we can't even imagine. Now, the people in 1860 could never imagine the civil rights movement. They can never imagine televisions. They can never imagine airplanes. They can never imagine cell phones. They can't imagine HBCUs, right? A lot of these things that we take for granted that exist in our lives right now are things that we would have a hard time explaining to them 160 years ago, right? So that means that looking forward, now this is, I want you to really use your imagination, try to follow me on this. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. I hope I'm not being too abstract here. But if you apply that same thing looking forward, right? You are the ancestors. You are the old folks from back in the day that are long dead. You've been dead for over 100 and something years. Well, they're now looking at you now. They're looking at what you created. They're affected by the things that you do, right? It's somebody who bought farmland. There are families right now that are extremely wealthy that bought land in 1862, right? They're like that. They just kept it in the family. Homestead Act, all that stuff that happened in the 19th century, in the 1800s, that affects wealth distribution today, right? There are things that people could have bought for $1 in 1862 that are worth $1 million now. Right. So the thing is that you have that same opportunity, and you also have that same mandate, if you will. But it's a personalized mandate. You can mandate yourself if you want to. I'm not going to mandate you. I don't have the power nor the desire to mandate you on anything. But I encourage you to mandate yourself to understand the significance of where you are at this point in history. Right? How it's going to look. They probably won't even remember you, to be honest with you. They may or may not. You may get lucky. You might become famous and they might remember you, but you won't care because you'll be dead. But you do have the opportunity, like ancestors did 160 years ago, if you can visualize the future. Imagine if you were a person in 1860 who could visualize at least a tiny fraction of the year 2021. If you could visualize that, okay, I don't think they're going to remember me. I don't think that everything I do is going to matter, but there are some basic things I could try to do now that are going to leave an impact, leave a legacy that will last far beyond the time that I'm gone. If you can have that vision, then you have a tremendous superpower. You really have a superpower right at your disposal. You go and you buy that house and you keep it in your family for 100 years, or buy that plot of land and you own it for the next 100, 200 years. You're literally turning your grandchildren into billionaires by doing that, right? So making that move, whatever move you make, you have to make the move. And I want you to go home tonight. I want you to practice visualizing the future. I want you to try to imagine the world 100 years after you're dead. And I want you to try to imagine anything that you can do that will impact the world 100 years after you're gone. And if you have a hard time visualizing what your actions are going to look like 100 years from now, all I want you to do is I want you to go backward 100 years, because you can see the past, you can't see the future. And I want you to look back to 1921 and where Black Wall Street was created. Pay attention now, we're still talking about Black Wall Street. Once you look back to 1921, 1919, 1918, where you had, Marcus Garvey's movement, you had W.E.B. Du Bois, you had all these household names that were doing major things 100 years ago that are still remembered today. right? So in 2021, I believe that they're going to be talking about what we're doing right now. They're going to be talking about Dr. Claude Anderson and the impact that he's making right now. I believe they're going to be talking about a lot of things that are happening right now. And the question is, how are we going to shape that legacy, right? How are we going to position our children to win? I hope that that was helpful in terms of helping you visualize the future. And I want you to just realize that you have the power of God in your hands because you have the ability to shape the future in ways that your descendants never will. If they could have a time machine, imagine if you had a time machine and you could go back to talk to your great grandmother and get her to go buy that piece of land when she's not even thinking about it because she's thinking about trying to get the bills paid this week, right? Imagine if you could go to your grandma and say, "No, grandma, please get the family together, buy this plot of land, put it in a contract. This is going to be worth $100 million in 100 years from today." Like, imagine if you could do that, right? Well, there's a descendant. You have an ancestor or a descendant that's thinking the same thing right now. 100 years from now, if they're in the struggle, they're going to look back and say, "Damn, I wish I could go back to the year 2021 and get this property or make this move or start this company or keep this business going because that was going to turn into something big. Now I've got to start over from scratch." A lot of us have to start over from scratch because we didn't have people in the family that had the vision or the opportunity to have the vision to keep something going or to build something that was going to last. Okay, so let me keep going. I had to share that with you because that was literally a thought I had this week, and I was literally meditating on that. I was literally trying to see the future by looking at the past and seeing myself from the future. That's why I'm such a weirdo, but I like being weird because I don't want to be like everybody else. In a world that's this screwed up, I do not want to be a normal man because normal black men get killed, they get oppressed, they get crushed, they get distracted. I don't want to be normal. I want all of us to embrace the inner superpower that we all have at our disposal. So chapter 8, I'm going to read a little bit of this, and then we're going to close up for the night. He says, a new era is dawning, bringing dramatic changes across the world. Within the next 20 years, these changes will place Black people in the midst of one of the most important and turbulent periods in the history of mankind. There will be accelerated technological changes, unprecedented political upheaval, massive global population migration, and merging national political economies. These global changes will produce new anxieties and uncertainties. There will be a marked increase in ethnic and racial hostility as racial groups compete for power, wealth, and the control of resources. Throughout mankind's history, competitive struggles between ethnic and racial groups have regulated their populations and established a relative ranking of power among them. In power struggles, the strongest survive and prosper. The weak or non-competitive groups disappear or live to serve the strong. Black Americans approaching the threshold of the 21st century as a non-competitive socioeconomic disaster. It is ill-prepared to compete with other racial and ethnic groups. Contrary to popular belief, Blacks have made only relatively slight political and economic progress. Their quality of life has improved only because the general conditions of white society have improved. The crucial question now concerns not civil rights, voting rights, affirmative action, or even equal opportunity. Instead, the question is whether or not Black Americans are ready to face the socioeconomic realities that confront them. Do Blacks understand what will happen to them if they do not pull themselves up by the year 2013? Now, remember, he wrote this book 30 years ago. I don't know if we did it or not, right? Some of us did, right? Some of us pulled ourselves up. Some of us didn't. Do they understand what they are at risk of, that they are at risk of becoming a permanent underclass in America? Developing political and economic forces do not bode well for Blacks. Black America's frail state makes it vulnerable to international and domestic developments that could converge and do great injury to Blacks. He says around the year 2013. Conditions for Blacks will be made more serious by the following. This is what Dr. Anderson predicted back 30 years ago. Let's see how much of this came to pass. He says, 1, the hardening sentiments of the next white generation, which surveys predict will be more indifferent and harbor stronger anti-Black attitudes. Next, the merging of international superpower economies that will force Blacks to compete with better prepared and united groups from around the globe. Okay, that's true. You got a lot of things like, the Asian countries coming together, NAFTA, stuff like that. And if you think about it, like things like NAFTA destroyed cities like Detroit and Milwaukee and stuff like that. Remember, Detroit was doing really well back when the auto industry was producing lots of stuff there. And it's not that Detroit's doing terrible now. There are some pockets of positivity there, but to some extent, some would describe a city like Detroit to be a little bit like a plantation. It's a city that has a lot of black people, but it's run by white people. And I don't think an African American owns a single gas station in the city of Detroit, but I could be wrong about that. Gary, Indiana is another example. Gary was flourishing. Gary was doing really well. My wife is from Gary, and I go to Gary now. Now, a lot of people feel like there's nothing happening in Gary. And so some of that really comes from this idea, this economic reality that whenever you're doing good, you always want to prepare for when things start going bad. Or whenever you're doing really well in one area, you always want to spread your money out so that you're making money in multiple areas, right? So when Gary, the economy of Gary, for example, was doing really well, they should have been preparing for the future of Gary to say, okay, how are we going to still make money if if the factories leave, right? If the steel mills leave, what are we going to do? You can't assume the steel mills are going to be there forever. And this is true also for you as individuals. If you're making money right now, if you're blessed enough to be doing well financially right now, you need to start stacking your chips and putting your money toward the next big move. Start developing that new skill, making those new connections, investing in that new line of business. Do something different from what you're doing so that when the thing you're doing dries up, you're ready to make that next pivot. Some of these major cities, particularly in the Midwest, that were leaning on automobile manufacturing or steel mills and all this other stuff, they didn't have a plan B. Next thing you know, those cities were in the toilet because there was nothing else that people could do once that one particular opportunity disappeared. Flint is another example, right? No disrespect at all to the people of those cities. It's just this is how you want to engage in your economic thinking. The economy is always changing. There's always money somewhere. There's always opportunity somewhere. And this is why economic education is critical, because if you have economic education, you're paying attention to the latest developments in crypto and other industries, whatever industry you're in, you kind of know where things are going. Remember, at the beginning of this chapter, Dr. Anderson's quote from Apollonius was, only the gods see what is to come, but a wise man can see what is coming, right? The ordinary man only sees what is coming, right? So the ordinary man, the ordinary woman gets trapped in the moment. You have a lot of people that get trapped in the moment. You tell them it's 2021, they think it's going to be 2021 forever. They're 27 years old, they think they're going to be 27 forever, living like a 27-year-old forever. They ain't even practicing or even thinking about what they need to do to transition their life to what it means to be in your 30s, right? They're not thinking about what that next move is, right? So ordinary men, ordinary people are people who are either only focused, they're either trapped in the moment or they're reacting to what just happened. Right? The wise man is always looking ahead. The wise woman is always looking ahead. So I want you to practice looking ahead. That's why we did that exercise a minute ago where I said to you, I want you to try to see the world 160 years from now. And the best way to see the world 160 years in the future is to look at the world 160 years in the past. The exact same way you look at people from the year 1861 is exactly how they're going to look at you. So I want you to look at an old picture from the Civil War, and I want you to look and just think about it, like, man, those people are dusty, they look unhappy, they look dirty, they're going through hell. Well, they're going to look at you kind of the same way. You're going to look old-fashioned, dusty, and raggedy because whatever the technology is that you can't even imagine is going to put them in a space that you can't even predict, right? So practice doing that. That's how you win the game. Next, he says that another thing Dr. Anderson warns about is that higher unemployment and less public assistance resulting from downsizing and privatizing government services. That did happen. You did have a black unemployment issue for a while under Obama. It's actually going away during the pandemic. Black unemployment's dropped a lot. Also, you have less public assistance. You do. Welfare isn't what it used to be. Continued deterioration of black families, churches, and other institutions. So is the black family better or worse off now than it was 30 years ago? And somebody answer me in the chat, better or worse? Type better or worse. Is the black family better off than we were 30 years ago or worse off? What y'all think? Answer the question. Better or worse? Okay, Terrence and Barbara, Bernard, Katina, Akila. Okay. Yeah, worse off. And I agree with you. We are worse off family-wise, so he's right about that. The loss of status of blacks from a majority minority to a minority minority. He says the tide of Hispanic and Asian immigrants could reach 81 million and 46 million respectively by the year 2013. Now, I don't know what the numbers are specifically for each of those groups, but I do know that we are a minority now. So he was right about that. We are not a majority minority. We're not the biggest minority, so-called minority anymore. We are now a minority in terms of population size. Deteriorating, pay attention, this is a good one. Deteriorating social and economic conditions that will spur a general increase in criminal activity with a major portion associated with blacks. So in the early 90s, Dr. Anderson predicted deteriorating social and economic conditions. So when you think about cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, give me a yes or no. Do you think that the economic and social conditions have deteriorated? Like, is there more? Is there more violence? Is there more? Are the streets more dangerous in a lot of these areas than they were before? Yes or no? I can tell you too. I mentioned you guys before. 200 rappers died last year, which is kind of crazy. Also in Chicago, they just had 1,000 murders in Chicago. They haven't had 1,000 murders in Chicago since 1994. So Chicago, which is a Democratic-run city. I'm not telling you to go be a Republican. I'm just telling you what the Democrats are doing, because most of us, many of us, if we do vote, we do vote Democrat. I don't have a lot of faith when you have a Democratic-run city and you had 1,000 homicides in the city of Chicago, many of them children. Let's see. The next prediction he makes is the continuing impact of a 350-year-old national public policy on the use of blacks that basically made blacks obsolete 3 decades ago. So he argued that black people became obsolete in the 1960s, actually, from an economic standpoint, particularly with the emergence of illegal immigrants and also technology. And so he says that trend will continue. So here's what he says here. He says, developing black empowerment strategies. We're on page 175 of Black Labor, White Wealth. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. Now is the time for Black America to start developing strategies for becoming a more competitive group. The purpose of this book is twofold. Firstly, to identify the historical genesis of white wealth and power and black poverty and powerlessness. Secondly, based upon conclusions from historical analysis, to use white society as a model and recommend strategies that blacks can adopt in order to gain competitive wealth and power. In this chapter, various strategies for improving the quality of life for Black Americans are discussed, followed by analyses and recommendations. These strategies will demand from blacks a more focused and self-serving set of priorities and behavior patterns. They are absolutely necessary in order to give blacks real power. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick overview of the strategies he mentions. He mentions a few strategies. I'm going to read the strategy and give you the first sentence. And then next week, we're going to meet for the book club, and we're going to start reading through the strategies one by one. They're pretty thorough in terms of what he recommends. And what I would suggest, a supplement I'm offering in terms of what Dr. Anderson put in this book, is I'm suggesting that you consider not necessarily waiting for centralized black leadership to do this for you, right? The Al Sharptons ain't gonna do it for you. The Joe Bidens ain't gonna do it for you. Your favorite rapper on TV ain't gonna do it for you, right? You got to do this, in my view. You got to do this in your own household, right? So I'll offer my 2 cents, and I can be maybe one of your many advisors on how to form the public policy in your own family. But I encourage you to apply it on a family by family specific basis. We are going to meet next Wednesday, by the way. The book club is normally Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. This week we had to do Thursday because I was traveling to Atlanta. I appreciate your patience. I tried to let everybody know, so I hope that was okay. But next week we go back to our Wednesday schedule, okay? And so strategy 1 is leadership. He says humans, like all orders of life, seek leadership and find it naturally. But in America, white society has been the proactive institutional leader, and Black America has reactively followed with new leaders who arise in response to new issue or events. So we know how that works, right? We know that white folks are kind of our parents. They tell us what to talk about. They tell us what to care about. If there's a police shooting of one black man, everybody talks about that black man. But at the same time, if 5 little girls get murdered in Chicago, and I'd say, hey guys, if 5 little girls got killed the same day this other guy got shot, nobody cares about the 5 little girls. Everybody's talking about the one case they saw on CNN. So to some extent, white media, white-owned media is the leader in terms of what we think about as a community. Strategy 2, wealth and capital formation. So after you get better leadership, you formulate wealth and capital so you can support that leadership and give them real power. Centuries of compulsory black pauperism have created a power imbalance between whites and blacks. Dominant white society possesses nearly 100% of the wealth and the tools for accessing and amassing wealth. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. recognized the importance of the relationship between wealth and racial equality late in his career. He told the Southern Christian Leadership Council, quote, "An American society must have a radical redistribution of wealth and economic power to achieve even a rough form of social justice. We must recognize that we can't solve our problems now until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power. Until the wealth imbalance is significantly reduced, black-white racial strife will continue unabated." That's what Dr. King said. So next week we'll talk about the wealth and power aspect of Dr. Anderson's recommendation. Strategy 3, wealth and group economics. Blacks are America's most impoverished population group, but when considered as a nation within a nation, they could generate disposable income to sustain Black economies. Black America has approximately, this is 30 years ago, 280 billion annually in disposable income. Now that's 1.4 trillion. But as a group, they remain impoverished because they failed to create their own internal economy, and therefore they do not retain their capital within their communities. To survive in the rapidly approaching pluralistic society, Blacks must create a Black economy. To develop economically, Black dollars must bounce or exchange hands 8 to 10 times before leaving the Black community. Contained and recirculated dollars within Black communities would stimulate business, create employment opportunities, and expand tax bases. Next recommendation, Black underemployment and unemployment. He talks about that. The next one is Black and white psychosocial behavior patterns. That's strategy 5. We're going to talk about that next week. Strategy 6 is building a strong sense of community, learning how to have healthy relationships with each other and actually wanting to be around each other. Strategy 7, the role of institutions. The church, any church leaders in the house, we're looking for you to lead your church. You are one of our last great institutions. We need you to step up your game. Take us to heaven on earth, not just heaven in heaven. Strategy 8, government resources. Strategy 9, political empowerment. So it's 9 strategies. So Dr. Anderson gives 9 strategies for Black empowerment. And what I'm going to do next week is I probably won't be able to cover them all in one sitting, but I am going to break down every single one of those strategies with you so we can kind of understand how we want to apply these strategies to our own families. Okay. And so that's enough for today. I think we've covered quite a bit. This is pretty intense stuff. And so I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want to encourage you to come to the book club meetings with your family, bring your kids. I believe that the sooner your kids get exposed to these ideas, the better off they'll be. So bring your kids, bring your grandkids, bring your baby mama, bring whoever you want to bring. And I would love to talk to them as well if you think that this message is one that benefits your family. The other piece is, in case you guys want to know, just as an FYI, I have a new book coming out actually in March. It's called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. And one of the things I'm covering in this book are what I call the 3 C's of developing an economy. Here's the thing about an economy. An economy is not just something that is global. It is not just something that is national. It's not just something that's statewide. An economy can exist within your own family, within your own circle. You can actually create little economies within, say, 10 of you that allow you to get almost every single thing you need. So anyway, with this book, that's one of the things I'm going to break down. I'm actually writing on this right now. Actually, if you go to my Instagram, you'll see where I actually wrote an article that's kind of sort of pulled from the book. On sort of what that looks like in terms of creating our own jobs. Okay, so it's called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. I'm gonna do a little bit of a book tour in the spring and in the summer. I'll let you guys know where we're gonna go. One place we're definitely gonna be is at the Essence Music Festival when it goes to New Orleans. We're gonna we've literally already booked up the West End right next to the Essence Fest. So if you want to go to the Essence Fest, just know that next door we'll be doing a bunch of stuff during the Essence Fest. We did not ask for Essence's permission. We love Essence. We think Essence, they have wonderful people. It's a great place, but we decided we also want to do our own thing. So I will be there for 2 days, kind of doing my thing. So that's one example of a place we're going to be. We're going to go to some other cities. I'll let you know. All right. So anyway, have a good night, everybody. It was great talking to you. And as a quick reminder, if you go to boycewatkins.com, you can find out more about the Black Wealth Bootcamp, which starts January 6th. You can find out about a lot of other stuff we have going on. We always have something for you almost every single day in the Black Business School, because if you will allow us to, we, as well as the dozens of Black experts in your community that we have come into encountered through time, we would love to be part of your educational process for you and your family. We got everything you need, and we would love to help you. And we hope that you'll at least take a look. All right, guys. So have a good night. God bless you. Love you. And I will see you guys next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.